It was the 1970s in Montana. A young woman was brutally murdered in a way that baffled investigators. No clear motive, no obvious suspect, no pattern. But this killing would do something extraordinary. It would force the FBI to start hunting, not just criminals, but their minds. The early 1970s were a violent time in America. Homicide rates were rising. The idea of the serial killer wasn't yet part of the public's vocabulary. Local police were often helpless in cases of extreme brutality. Killers who struck without motive, who left scenes that felt almost ritualistic, didn't fit into traditional investigative models. And then came a murder in Montana that would change everything. It began on a cold January morning in 1973, in the quiet town of Manhattan, Montana. 7-year-old Susan Yeager vanished from her family's tent at a campground. The zipper had been cut with a knife. Her parents woke to find nothing. No screams, no struggle, only silence. Months passed, there were no answers. But in 1974, another crime occurred. This time, 19-year-old Sandra Smelligan was abducted while hitchhiking. Her remains were found in a shallow grave. The brutality of the killings drew national attention, and suspicions soon turned toward one man, David Meyerhofer, a young, clean-cut Vietnam veteran. On the surface, he was polite, soft-spoken, the kind of man no one would expect. But behind that mask, he was something else entirely. Investigators had little evidence. What they did have were chilling phone calls. The Yeager family began receiving anonymous calls late at night, a man describing details of the crime that no one else could know. His voice was calm, almost gentle. The FBI realized they were dealing with a different kind of killer, someone organized, intelligent, controlled. But how could they predict his next move?
At the time, the FBI had no formal method for analyzing the psychology of killers. They relied on fingerprints, physical evidence, and confessions. But this case pushed them into uncharted territory. The Bureau brought in two men, agents who would later become legends, Howard Teten and Patrick Mullany. They had been experimenting with a radical idea that by studying behavior at a crime scene, you could understand the killer's mind. This was the seed of what would become criminal profiling. They looked at Meyerhofer's background, his military training, his obsession with control, his ability to charm while hiding rage. They examined the phone calls, the careful planning, the lack of emotion. The profile they built described an intelligent, socially competent man, likely with military experience, living close to the crime scenes. A man who killed not in a frenzy, but with precision. It fit Meyerhofer exactly. Eventually, police gained a confession. In 1974, Meyerhofer admitted to killing 4 people, including young Susan Yeager. He led investigators to her remains, hidden in a remote area. But before he could stand trial, he took his own life in jail.
The case shocked America. A small Montana town had harbored a methodical serial killer. But it also marked the first time the FBI had successfully used behavioral analysis to catch a murderer. From this single case, a new division was born, the Behavioral Science Unit at Quantico, Virginia. This unit would go on to study the most infamous killers in history: Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer. They interviewed hundreds of murderers, building a database of patterns, rituals, and psychological signatures. And they developed the science of criminal profiling, the ability to enter the mind of a killer and use it against them. The Montana murders were devastating. Families were destroyed, lives stolen. But from that horror came a tool that would save countless others. The FBI learned that not all evidence is physical. Sometimes the most important clues are in the human mind. And it all began with one brutal murder in a quiet Montana town.